Midsummer Scream. Universal Studio Hollywood Halloween Horror Nights is a Southern California tradition that draws fans to Los Angeles from all corners of the globe, simply because they want to be scared to death. This year, fans will face classic Universal monsters, celebrate holidays in hell, take another trip to the Upside Down, and witness the Ghostbusters battle sinister spirits. What else does Universal have in store for this year's Halloween Horror Nights in Hollywood? Are you ready to find out? Please welcome to the stage, Universal Studios Hollywood Halloween Horror Nights Creative Director, John Murdy.
How you doing? All right, I have some good news and I have some bad news, okay? Which do you want first? Bad news, okay. My partner in crime, Chris Williams, is unable to be with us today because he is sick. He texted me on the way over and he's like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. So on behalf of Chris, he wanted me to say he's very sorry he couldn't be with all you guys today. Do you want the good news? Roll the video.
Hey, Midsummer Scream, it's Greg Nicotero here. Very, very sad that I can't be there with you and John Murdy, but we have some very exciting news. Creepshow is coming to a movie by George Romero, as well as a new Shudder streaming series produced by myself, made with lots of love and blood. I don't even think that makes sense, but it makes sense. Anyway, The Maze is coming to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal. You're gonna love it. It's gonna have elements of the original movie plus the new series. I can't wait for you guys to see it.
All right, thank you very much for coming. Creepshow is coming to Halloween Horror Nights 2019 in Universal Studios Hollywood. Give it up! How many of you guys are fans of the original film, the 1982 film? As a coincidence, so am I. I saw the film in the theater and I instantly fell in love with it. You know, Creepshow's been one of those properties that's kind of always been on my wish list that maybe one day we would do it. And then, as it turned out, last year during Halloween Horror Nights, Greg Nicotero came to the event and told us that there was going to be a new Creepshow series on Shudder. Do you guys know about this? They just debuted the trailer at Comic-Con. So the maze that we're creating for Halloween Horror Nights 2019 at Universal Studios Hollywood is a combination of the original film directed by George Romero, the great George Romero, and the upcoming series that's going to be on Shudder that's debuting right around the time our event opens. So you're going to get the best of both worlds. Is that okay with you? So what I'm going to do today, boils and ghouls, is I'm going to show you a little bit about what we're going to be doing with Creepshow. And then I brought some other goodies to share with you as well. Maybe share some Scare Zone characters, some Scare Zone art, some of the things we're creating for Halloween Horror Nights 2019. Is that okay with you? And I should, you know, in the spirit of full disclosure, I designed this obviously for myself and Chris to talk. So there'll be times when I click to a slide, which I, honestly have no idea what I'm talking about. So just nod and smile when we get to those parts, okay? All right, now obviously this all started with Greg Nicotero. Greg came to the event last year and it brought everybody down from both the original Creepshow and also the new Shudder series. And actually that's when we started talking. That's very, very common for us. We're usually planning the event, actually right now we're actually planning 2020 at the same time we're planning 2019. But it's very often that we meet with people during the event and we started talking about the properties that we want to do the following year. So we started talking really early about Creepshow. Obviously, you know, we have a long history with Mr. Nicotero. This is a picture of Greg and I inside a real helicopter that we created for one of our Walking Dead mazes. But I ran into Greg a lot, longer than Walking Dead. Years ago, I produced a show for Universal Studios Hollywood, the old special effects stages show. I used to have a set called The Creature Factory. And I did a whole piece, a makeup piece on Greg Nicotero and his work in a movie called Day of the Dead. And that's actually when I first met Greg, so I've known him for a long time. What's great with working with someone like Greg and the talented people at K&B Effects is they know our product, they're big fans of Horror Nights. So we actually designed this maze, kind of hand in hand with Greg, sitting down in our office with Chris and I. And also what's really exciting is because he did all the makeup and K&B did all the makeup for the new show, that means we get to utilize the same molds that Greg created for the TV series. So when you get to see the creatures for the new series, you're going to be seeing the exact same stuff that you saw on the television show. So let's talk about Creepshow. So when you think about a movie like this and how you want to approach it, the origin of this whole movie is that it's inspired by the old EC comics, the horror comics of the 1950s that Romero grew up with. We really wanted to pay homage to that, because if you guys watch Creepshow, it's got a lot of references to comic books, right? So the facade for our attraction is actually going to be a giant Creepshow comic book. And you're going to walk into the comic book, and the comic book's going to come to life. I'll show you a couple of examples of that. So now, the host for our experience, kind of the through line that's going to take us through these 5 different stories that we're dealing with, is of course the Creep. This is the new Creep. This is the Creep that Mr. Nicotero designed for the new series. So the first section of the maze is going to be called Meet the Creep, and we're going to be kind of walking through the pages of a comic book. I'll show you just a rough design element. This is like the comic book art that you saw in the film, and our idea is that we wanted to bring that to life. So working with our designers, we were able to reach out to everybody at Shudder and not only get all of the comic book art being generated for the new TV series, but the thing I always loved about those old comic books were the kooky ads. You would find them, you know what I'm talking about? The authentic monkey's paw, only $4.98. So when you're walking through it, not only are you going to see comic book panels that are going to be setting up the 5 different stories that you're going to experience, but it's also going to be some of this, these ads that you would historically find in these comic books. So this is just a rough SketchUp model that our design staff and our art department are working on. So as you're going through this first section, you're kind of walking through the pages of the Creepshow comic book, and the Creep is coming to life and attacking you. And you're going to see the Creep throughout this experience. As I mentioned, he's more or less the through line. But then we get to our first story. So Chris and I had the, unenviable task of picking 3 stories from Creepshow, the 1982 film. So right out of the gate, the way Chris and I work is we have to both, agree 100% or it doesn't go in the maze, and that's how we've always worked. We didn't have any arguments about what to start the Creepshow maze off with. We wanted to start it off with Father's Day. Now, how many of you guys have seen the original film, the 1982 film? Okay. And how many of you guys are going to now go out and rent or, get it on... Yep, and watch it. It's one of my favorite horror movies. If you like anthology horror movies, it's fantastic. But the first story is called Father's Day, and it's about this patriarch of this very wealthy man, who's kind of a tyrant, and his daughter murders him with an ashtray. And then on Father's Day every year, she goes to the family, plot. He's buried right there on the property, and she goes to pay her respects to the father she killed. But on this particular Father's Day, old Nathan Grantham comes out of the ground, and he says, "It's Father's Day, I want my cake." And that's, what we're going to bring to life. So what we have to bring to life is the Grantham house and the family plot. So after you get the comic book panel that sets you up for Father's Day, this is what you're walking into. So gave this to Chris. I pull all the reference from the movie, and then Chris and his art department starts drawing it. So this is just an elevation. This is from Chris's drawing package. This is the Grantham house. And, Chris and our art department, what they want to do, and what we always at least strive to do with every maze we do for Halloween Horror Nights, is to try to nail every detail. So, That includes Nathan Grantham's grave, and we wanted that exact gravestone. We wanted to build it exactly like the movie. We wanted to see Nathan coming out of the grave. So this is just another elevation that shows you, what Chris and his team are designing and what is being built right now. And then you go into the Grantham's house, and really, one of the things that was really important to us, and it was important to Greg, and we talked a lot with Greg about how to bring this to life in a maze, is not only is the movie inspired by a comic book, but it looks like a comic book. All of the individual segments start off as a comic book panel illustration, and then they bleed into the live action. But also, whenever something really bad happens in Creepshow, the lighting changes, and it goes red and blue, and it has those crazy kind of lightning bolt patterns. And this is something we wanted to bring to the maze. So as you're going through the Grantham house and you're being attacked by Nathan in his, just crawled out of the grave state, every time he attacks, we're doing this lighting trick so that we're paying homage to the film. Even to the extent of doing the lightning bolt pattern. So here's another elevation I'll show you. This is, of course, the I Got My Cake scene from Father's Day. But when he comes out through that, serving door, the whole background that lights up behind him turns into that kind of red and blue lightning bolt pattern that you see in the film. So all throughout the maze, the direction we're giving our lighting designers and our lighting team is to bring it to life so that it feels like a comic book. And that's Father's Day. Story number 2, or episode number 2, The Crate. You guys remember The Crate? Okay, this is Adrienne Barbeau, Fritz Weaver, Hal Holbrook were the stars of this particular episode of the movie. And what it's about, a small college on the East Coast where a janitor just so happens to find this really old shipping crate from 1834 that's shoved under a staircase. It's probably been down there for, over 100 years. And he calls the professor and tells them, to come down here. They may have made a major discovery. But when they open up the crate, there's something really, really bad inside it. Do you guys know the name of what's the official name? This should have been my trivia question. I should have used this later. Fluffy, that's right. Fluffy the Crate Beast is the name of the creature. He's like an ape-like creature that's inside the crate, and of course he starts eating people, and that's where the horror ensues. So the main setting for us to recreate here is the science classroom. And of course, as you can see from the screen grabs I've got on the screen, there's an awful lot of blood. And I thought it might be kind of interesting, and this was something I was going to have Chris talk about, because he knows the chemistry behind this. But how we make blood, because you think it's like, a no-brainer. Yeah, we do a horror event, there's a lot of blood. But when did you guys see our Shining maze a couple of years ago? Remember the elevator scene, all that blood? That's actually a special kind of blood that our guys invented. When they put it on, it looks like hot pink, and it looks horrible. So the first time I ever saw them do this, I walked into The Shining, and I was like, my God, what have you done? It's pink! But when it dries, it turns red and it looks wet, and it always retains that look. So these are just, this is just blood tests. This is what we do in our copious spare time. So our prop team, which is headed up by a gentleman named Tony Lindis and a whole bunch of talented prop and set dressing artisans, they have to make a whole ton of this stuff. So they prefabricate the blood. That's why you see that blue tape on the side. They put it down so they can lift it off again, and then they can take it into the environment and then, fasten it into the scenes and attach it. But the great part of it is it always looks wet, and it stands up to heavy traffic, which we have in a maze. There's a lot of you that walk through our mazes. This is just another example of Chris's drawing package. So Chris hand draws everything. Even today, this always blows people's minds when I tell them that. We hand draw everything. So, if you're aspiring, to do this for a career, how many of you guys out there want to be in this industry or do something like this for a living? A lot of you, yeah. Learn how to draw. I know we always default to the computer these days and think that everything's designed in the computer, and of course we use the computer. It's a major tool in our design kit. But all of our set designers and illustrators, they all hand draw every single elevation. And this is just an elevation that shows the scene when you come in and meet Fluffy. Now, of course, we have to create Fluffy. But he's really small. If you've ever seen the movie, he's his feet would be like where my knees are, and this would be his body. So that presented an interesting challenge for us. So Chris and our team devised a kind of clever way to do Fluffy. He's inside his crate, part of his body is fake, part of it is a creature costume, and it's integrated with a live performer, and we're building that right now. As a matter of fact, this is his feet, and that's his hand. Every day my phone blows up with like endless text from my makeup team, which is a guy named Pat McGee Effects. And he's busily working with all of these molds and sculpting, and he's just constantly sending me all of these updates, but they're huge files, and they constantly block my phone. Now, one of the people that Fluffy attacks is a guy named Charlie Garrison, and he's a student at the college, graduate student, and Fritz Weaver tells him, "Charlie, don't go in there!" But of course, like every horror movie, what do you do when somebody says, "Don't go in there"? You go in there. Charlie goes in, he can't resist because this might make his academic career. Unfortunately, he wakes up Fluffy, and Fluffy smacks him in the face with his claw and does this horrible gash across his face. So that's a different kind of makeup that we have to create. We create a lot of masks, but we also do a lot of what's called prosthetic makeup. And that's usually like a foam latex appliance, sometimes it's silicone, that gets glued to the actor's face every single night. And then the makeup gets blended and applied with the blood. So this is the prosthetic makeup that will be applied to the performers playing Charlie Garrison. Episode 3. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but when I saw Creepshow back in 1982, and I was 15? So that means I probably snuck in. This is the episode that really freaked me out the most. Cockroaches. I can't stand cockroaches. Do you guys like cockroaches? First time I ever met my wife, she was holding a cockroach in her hand. She's like, "Look," and I'm like, "Oh, you're cool, let's get married." This is about a story about a billionaire who lives in what's supposedly a germ-free apartment, a penthouse apartment in New York City. And he's paranoid about germs, so he's kind of modeled after Howard Hughes. But he keeps noticing that these cockroaches keep getting into his apartment, and he's getting more and more angry as he goes along, trying to understand how his germ-free apartment could have these bugs in it. And unfortunately, there's a blackout in New York City, and then all of the cockroaches start piling in through his vents and through the sink and through every single nook and cranny of his apartment until he is completely consumed with cockroaches. And you remember the last shot? I'll save it, I got a picture of it. This is actually probably one of the harder design challenges for Chris and his team. It's actually easy to do jacked up scenes, like haunted houses that are aged and look like they're falling down. That's actually easier to do scenically than to make something that looks super, super clean. This set always reminds me of Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. So that's what Chris has to, reproduce, and then my props guys have to go out and find like a vintage jukebox that looks exactly like the one in the film. This is the elevation that goes along with that, so of course our guys draw all this stuff. Some of it gets built by our scenic companies, some of it gets built by our prop artisans. I just focused on one thing. When the blackout happens, there's like an oxygen sensor siren that goes, and I was going through the film like I do whenever I'm working on a maze. And I'm like, what is that thing? I don't know. It's kind of cool. I'm going to put it in the treatment, see if Chris builds it or not. And so I was happy when I saw his drawing package, and I was like, geez, you actually you did a whole page just on this oxygen sensor. So it's just like trying to get all the details of the movie, try to nail all the things that we think are important in every scene, and then try to bring them to life for you guys so that when you're walking through our maze, hopefully, if we've done our job right, you feel like you're walking through the movie. And of course this happens. So, this is quite a challenging scene to do. I know our prop guys have got like gajillions and billions of bugs that they're working on, but you want the movement too. And it's just not acceptable to release a bunch of cockroaches loose in a maze. And, it's frowned upon, so we couldn't do that. So of course what we're going to do is we're going to rely on projection as well as all of the static things that are in the scene. So you're going to go through Upson's penthouse apartment, you're going to see that all the bugs are starting to get in, and then you're going to go into his private sleeping chambers, and in the film he gets overwhelmed with cockroaches, and then it kind of cuts to the next, presumably like the next day. And the maintenance guy is finally calling to tell him, hey, I'm here to help you with your bug problem. He's not answering the phone, and then you see like one cockroach run out of his mouth, and then hundreds of them pour out of it. So we're going to do this scene, of course, because how could we not? So that's a live performer. So we've got a live performer integrated with a special effect illusion table. This is kind of like how we did the reverse bear trap for Saw. If you saw our Saw maze or one of our Saw mazes over the years, it's a slant board effect. So that part of the performer's body is concealed within the set, and we're marrying up their real body, which is usually their head, shoulders, and arms, to a fake body. And then we're adding layers of projection on top of it, so that when you come through this last scene, there's bugs crawling everywhere. And then after that, we're going to mess with you. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't really want to tell you. I'll save some things. Now, the last two stories in Creepshow are based on the new Shudder series, and I'm not going to show any spoilers because I want you guys all to experience the series and see it just like I saw it. So I'm just going to show you a couple of references of like the drawing packages and things like that, but I'm going to save all the creatures because Greg would kill me because he's created all of them, and he wants to have that impression, obviously, when you watch it for the first time. But there's two particular stories we're focusing on.